Hello, glad you're here for the 2.06 quiz help video. Alright, so this quiz is all about cylinders. Okay, so this is a picture of a cylinder right here. You can think of it like a can. It's got a circle on the top and a circle on the bottom, and then it also has a height. This is a three-dimensional figure. Alright, the formula for volume of a cylinder is the volume equals pi times the radius squared times the height. And you also just need to remember, I know that you guys probably already know this, but if you're given a diameter, that's all the way across the circle, and then the radius is halfway across the circle. Notice in our formula, we have to plug in the radius. There's no spot to plug in the diameter. So if we're given a diameter, we need to make sure that we divide it in half to figure out what the radius is. So that's our need to know info. Let's get started. It says, what is the volume of a right circular cylinder with a radius of 3 and a height of 10? So let's go ahead and write down our volume of a cylinder formula. So I cut off my question. I'm not sure if your quiz is going to ask you to use pi or to use 3.14. So I'll show you both ways. But for right now, I'm going to leave it as pi. For r, for the radius squared, I'm going to plug in 3. And then for the height, I'm going to plug in 10. 3 squared is 9. 9 times 10 is 90. So this could be an answer. This is the exact answer. The volume equals 90 pi. Now, if it tells you to plug in 3.14 for pi, then we would get an approximate answer. So let's go ahead and get that answer as well. 90 times 3.14 is approximately 282.6. And anytime you do volume, you're going to have units cubed. So I'm not sure exactly which answer it wants, but either of those would be fine, depending on what it asks for. Alright, so this one says the volume of a cylinder is 225 pi centimeters cubed, and its height is 9 centimeters. What is the length of the cylinder's radius? Alright, so again, we're dealing with volume of a cylinder. So we have our formula, volume equals pi times r squared times h. And let's start plugging in what we know. It says that this is the volume, so that's going to go in for the letter V. It says that this is the height, so that's going to go in for the letter H. And our goal is to find the radius. So I'm trying to solve for the letter R. So if I want to get that R by itself, there's a lot of things I need to get rid of. I need to get rid of pi, I need to get rid of 9, and I need to get rid of the squared. So I'm going to start off by getting rid of pi. Right now it's pi times the radius squared. So the opposite of multiplying is to divide. So I'm going to divide by pi on each side. The reason I do that is because over here they would cancel, which is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get that r by itself. And the cool thing is they cancel over here as well. So we're just left with 225. Now I need to get rid of that 9. Again, I'm trying to solve for the radius. It's radius squared times 9, so the opposite is to divide. Now, if you want to do, you can do this in one step. You can do pi divided by 9 and pi divided by 9 if you want to. So just as a heads up, you can mush that into one step. All right, and then 225 divided by 9 is 25. And then I'm still not quite done solving for r. Now I have radius squared, but I want just radius. So the opposite of squaring is square rooting. Squares and square roots cancel. The square root of 25 is positive 5 and negative 5, but you can't have a radius that's a length of negative 5. So your radius is going to be 5 units long. All right, the next one says, what is the volume of a right circular cylinder with a base diameter of 20 and a height of 5? And it does tell us this time to express your answer using pi. So I want to make sure I don't plug in 3.14. I want to leave that pi symbol. All right, so we're dealing with volume. So of course we have our volume of a cylinder formula. This time it tells us the base diameter is 20. Well, y'all, there's nowhere to plug in a diameter. There's only a spot to plug in a radius and a height. So we need to change that diameter to a radius. So if all the way across is 20, halfway across would be 10. You can divide that by 2 to figure out that the radius is 10. And then the height is 5. So let's go ahead and plug in what we know. The radius is 10 and the height is 5. Be really, really, really careful not to plug in that 20. You cannot plug in a diameter for a radius. Got to make sure you take care of that. All right, and then we'll multiply it out. 10 squared is 100. 100 times 5 is 500. And we're just going to leave the pi symbol on there because it says express your answer using pi. So that would be our volume. And of course, I keep forgetting to say this, but volume is always units cubed. All right, what is the volume of a right circular cylinder with a base diameter of 17.5 and a height of 24.5? So again, we're dealing with diameter and we need radius. So we're going to take 17.5 and we're going to divide that by 2 to turn that into a radius. So my radius here is going to be 8.75. And then my height is going to be 24.5. I'm going to need both of those pieces. So let me go ahead and write my volume formula. Pi times radius squared times height. And this time it does say use 3.14 for pi and round your final answer to the nearest hundredth. So for pi, I'm going to plug in 3.14. For the radius, I'm going to plug in 8.75. And for the height, I'm going to plug in 24.5. All right, so let's multiply it all out. When I multiply all of that, I get 5,889.953125. And it specifically says to round our answer to the nearest 100th. Remember, there's 2 zeros in 100, so we want 2 decimal places. So I look at the number behind it. If it's 5 or higher, it'll move that second one up. Since if it's a 3, it's going to stay the same, and we can just cut off that part. So my answer would be approximately 5,889.95 units cubed. All right, and then the last one. A right circular cylinder has a height of 20.5 feet and a diameter 1 1/5 times its height. I don't even know where I got 1 point something. Okay, so the way this is worded is really tricky. So we know the height is 20.5. I'm going to go ahead and make a note of that. 20 and 1/2 is the same as 20.5. I'm going to go ahead and change them into decimals just because it's less painful for me. It says the diameter is 1 1/5 times its height. So the diameter is 1 1/5. I'm going to go ahead and change that 1/5 into a decimal. So I'm going to do 1 divided by 5, and that's 0.2. So the diameter is 1.2 times the height, which is 20.5. So you following me so far? It says that the diameter is 1.2 times its height. So we're going to take the diameter, we're going to multiply it by the height. I'm sorry, we're going to multiply that by the height to get the diameter. I can't even talk today. Jeez Louise. So this tells me that the diameter, when I multiply those together, the diameter is 24.6 units long. But again, in my volume formula, there's no spot to plug in the diameter. So I had to do that work to figure out the diameter, and now I need to use the diameter to figure out the radius. So remember, you can cut a diameter in half to figure out a radius. So the radius is going to be 12.3. And now I have the information that I need to figure out the volume. Because my ultimate goal is to figure out the volume. It does say use 3.14 for pi. And round your final answer to the nearest hundredth. So let's plug it all in. For pi, I'm going to plug in 3.14. For the radius, I'm going to plug in 12.3. And for the height, I'm going to plug in 20.5. And from here, it's just a calculator problem, so multiply it out in your calculator. Okay, so when I multiply all that out, I get 9,738 point blah, blah, blah. But I want to make sure that I round it correctly. It says to round to the nearest hundredths. Remember, hundredths has two zeros, so you want to go over 2 decimal places. Look at the number behind it. That 7 is 5 or higher, so that's going to make that 3 go up to a 4. So that should be your answer. And volume is always units cubed. All right, good luck on your quiz.